As Ivan said, I came into this business of pensions advisory in the late 70s when a friend of mine managed to convince me that the career I was pursuing at the time, which was research into Wittgenstein, had no economic value at all. And so he recruited me into his pensions advisory company, and I've been in that world ever since. I've specialised, as Ivan said, in working predominantly with the senior executives and other senior managers in large companies, helping them work out the strategy for their retirement. I've probably over the years worked with hundreds of such people, and you know something, there's one thing that's been the same all the time, and it's this: it's all about the people. I have a profound respect for actuaries. I'm coming after 3 of them, and the things they do with numbers just leave me awestruck. And there's probably loads of people out there that would leave me awestruck. I have been focusing, though, largely on what people feel, what they think, their aspirations, their hopes and their dreams, and how they can use the resources at their disposal to try and make those come about, because really it is all about the people. And I've been asked to look at these new products from that perspective, from a people perspective. And the first thing I guess I want to say is that pensions change is here to stay. It's not going away, you know, as we say in the North. And there's been a bell curve of change. And that bell curve has been really interesting. There have been some of us, like myself and others, who have been making a small cottage industry in the last 6-7 years with the people at the front of the bell curve, who've seen the opportunities that are there in reshaping their pension. Well, I think now all that's happening is we're moving across the bell curve, and that a lot of people now who may not have been early adapters are having to become adapters because the world is changing. And the thing about this movement of the bell curve, it's creating retirement opportunities for a lot of people, but it's also creating a need for employers and employees and consultants to have a dialogue in place to explore these issues. Perhaps to introduce some of these ideas, I can focus on a group of people who I probably know best in the world. I'd like to focus on 3 generations of my own family. This is my dad. He's almost 86. Well, actually, when this was taken, he was only 85. But really not much has happened in the meantime. But the interesting thing I was thinking about, when he signed up for his job in 1949 and went on the payroll, George Best and Van Morrison were 3 years old. Gay Byrne was at school. And his employer probably had no concept of the fact that in the year that Lady Gaga played in Belfast at the MTV Awards and Rory McIlroy, you see my cultural references are all a little bit northern, but we're all very proud of Rory. In the year that he became world #1, that my dad would effectively still be a liability on the balance sheet. That's the world's longest payroll, isn't it, really, when you think about it? And that he has been at the front of that petrol queue that David talked about, pumping the stuff into the tank. Actually, he's single and he's got 2 cars. That's how good the pension is. So he's really at the front of the queue. He's been doing great, thank you. He started in 1949 when George Best was 3 years old. That's some commitment. And this is my daughter and her family. They're in their 30s. They have realised that they're well at the back of the queue, that by the time they get to the pump, if they ever do, there'll be nothing left. And they've been redesigning a life. My daughter was an academic. She didn't actually take the conversation with my friend that says, leave that alone. Her husband was an artist, and they have formed a business, a lifestyle business, they call it, which is really all around, and you have to bear with me here because I don't really get it. It's all about creative storytelling. It seems to be making them some money. They realise that they're going to have to do this for all of their life because the petrol queue is too long, because there's probably nothing there anyway. They want to have a lot of fun on the journey, but they're redesigning their life in such a way that they have a lifestyle and a lifestyle occupation that is going to feed their needs for as long as they live, and they intend to live for a very long time. And then there's a generation in the middle, which is obviously very dear to me, and which I have been making, I suppose, a career out of advising. We're called the baby boomers, people broadly between 50 and 65. And I guess I've been advising baby boomers on their retirement plans and strategies all of my working life. I even wrote a book about it. We're a strange generation. And for many of us, life has indeed happened while we were making other plans. Now, some of that was our own fault back in the 60s. We were just making, we were just doing stuff. But anyway, and for many years we thought, when we joined the work market, we thought it would be like it is for my dad. I remember when I joined the work market, I thought, well, all you do is you work and you get money, and then you stop working and you still get money, and it's wonderful. But actually, as we've got older, there have been 4 things have happened which have changed all that. Number 1, we're going to live significantly longer than we thought we were. That's just happened. So that was life happening while we were making other plans. Secondly, we don't like the idea of shuffling around in slippers for half a life. We still have delusions of youth. Most people that buy open-top sports cars are probably over 50, I would say. We just think it's going to go on. I mean, that's my generation either killed themselves early through excess, or else are just going to live forever and don't want to grow up. I mean, that's just effectively how it happens. The third thing, we don't want our incomes to fall off a cliff when we reach a certain age. It's just not really in our psyche. We don't see why we can't be, traveling when we're 70. We can't be doing this, that, and that. We don't intend it to change. It could be delusional, but it's just how we feel. And lastly, because the last 4 years in our lives have changed everything. A lot of people of my generation were sorted, thank you, and just aren't sorted anymore. And unfortunately, what's happened is this great cartoon. Here we're coming along in our VW microbus of the 60s, and we're crashing into the people ahead of us, and we're saying, you know what, we've arrived too. You're still here, you're still retired. Well, we've been doing life differently since we were at school. We're going to do retirement differently. That's just the way it is, and we're not really going to change. In 2009, when I brought out How to Safely Quit the Day Job, I spent some time researching the attitudes to retirement held by a lot of people in my generation. And here's broadly what I found. The key word was flexibility. Flexibility means capability of adapting to becoming or being made suitable to a particular situation. So retirement was like that. We're like this. Well, we just want to change the concept. Why not? Why does it have to stay the same? And so you see from the 2 bubbles there that in the States, more than 3/4 of the boomer generation say they intend to keep working in retirement. I was talking to Ivan earlier. He said, are some people just not suited to retirement? The answer is yes. And a lot of people in America are saying, well, we're just not suited to retirement, thank you. It's not the kind of vibe that we want to have. We want to do something else. How can you say you're young and be retired at the same time? It's not possible. And that's who we are. And you think, well, that's America. They're like that. Yeah, but in Ireland, it's 50%. So it's not a lot less. It's kind of broadly the same. So that last statement proved that I'm not an actuary, by the way. And the thing that's important is this: as employers and employees and consultants and all of us begin to think about, because in this room, most of us are employees of somebody, and a lot of us are employing somebody, and we all have views on pensions, and we all are part of a conversation. And the most important thing in that conversation is aligning interests. I think there's a significant opportunity here at this time in our lives to reshape what it means to give pension provision. And we can align the needs for the balance sheet and the cash flow interests of the employer with lifestyle and aspirational interests of employee if we just bother to have the conversation, if we take time and invest in the conversation. And in the 15 minutes or so I have left, I'd like to look at how some of these ideas and products from Irish Life might help the clients with whom I work and see can that conversation take legs and can move on. I'm not suggesting that they will suit everybody. You know, the person who comes out with a one-size-fits-all pension solution in Ireland will be able to retire early and will be very rich. It just doesn't work that way. But I do think that with adaptation and after holding a sensible conversation, that a lot of these solutions will be applicable to a significant number of people. The thing I like about them is they're consultant-led solutions. In the famous words from the Profumo trial, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I am a fan of a consultant-led solution because I think the skill of consultants largely in the pensions world is to bring the conversation along. So I took a fictitious example, Oceanic. It was kind of appropriate. They were the airline in Lost, if you've ever watched Lost, and just the whole airline theme about parachutes and it's not going to work and all that. I just thought I would bring that along. They have a defined benefit scheme. It's not doing particularly well. Numbers are there on the screen. And as you can see, it's not a total disaster. It's not great. It's probably not sustainable. But there's still a bit of money there. And so the board of Oceanic are looking at these numbers. And they have, as they look at them, a certain number of interests which they want to align with their employees. And these are some of the key strategic and financial HR and operational interests in Oceanic when it comes to thinking about a go-forward solution for the pension scheme. Let's take a moment just to think about them. I mean, you may think of more. I'm sure I haven't covered everything, but these are all pretty central to any pensions journey that this company and these people may want to undertake. As we've heard today, there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of talk on the sovereign annuity proposition and how that can affect the pot of pension. And the Oceanic board have heard this. They are interested in it, and they've asked their consultant to talk them through it and explore it. And the pie chart here, which I'll show you, shows the current breakup of the fund. The blue is the pensioners and the red's everybody else. If they were to introduce a sovereign annuity valuation into the mix, it would change it to that. Let me just flip and show you that again. So the blue is 2/3 of the money there, and it's broadly half of the money there. And with this intense actuarial knowledge that I've been demonstrating up at the front, that's a big improvement for everyone that's not a pensioner. However, there are issues about that. I mean, clearly you'd applaud that if you weren't a pensioner, and you'd be very concerned about it if you were. And so they've looked at this and they've thought, is there any comfort we could give to the trustees? Because when the Oceanic board get together and talk about this and think it's a great idea, great solution, there's a guy in the corner that says, you know what, trustees are really going to push back on this. And rightly so. And so Oceanic sit and say, well, is there anything we can come up with? And they say, well, yes, clearly there's a risk here. It's not a guaranteed default at all. We're all hoping it'll be grand. So let's think about putting something in place that can provide comfort for the trustees. They look at a couple of alternatives. One, they say, well, okay, we could put an asset over there. It could be made available to the trustees if required, but not immediately put in. Or they could say, they also looked at the idea of saying also we could have an escrow account that we put monies into over a period of time if we don't have an asset available right now. But we wanted to do something to give comfort to the trustees in order to bring this into play so that we can begin to adjust the pie chart and move the conversation on between ourselves and the rest of the members. And so having done that and having thought about that, they decide that they're going to explore the aspirations of individual active and deferred members and, if possible, move the conversation forward. Now, clearly everyone hasn't got the same aspirations. That would be naive. So they look for And they realize that this conversation may take a little bit of time. But they do set it in place so it can happen. And they begin at the top. They begin with their executives for two reasons. Number one, because that's where the largest scheme liabilities are. And number two, because often that's where the most complex planning is required as well. But first of all, let's just think about the pensioners. I've just picked a typical pensioner here who you may recognize. What pensioners want is pretty clear. And I've summed it up in the third line. No surprises. Really, you're at a vulnerable and sensitive time in your life whenever you're retired. I don't know what my dad would do if suddenly he got this kind of note in the mail saying, you know what, you've got to sell the house, the boat, and at least half of your fleet of cars because we can't pay out this pension anymore. I know who he'd be on the phone with first, and I would not welcome the conversation. So the question is it achievable to create a world of no surprises for pensioners by going down either of the routes that Shane was talking about? I think there probably is, but I think we need to think about that, and that really is where the debate should be centred. But let's meet some of the other typical scheme members. Each, as I say, is typical of a cohort of others in the scheme, and as such, for ease of comparison, you'll note that they're all 55. That was simply because, well, I don't know, they're all 55. Okay, Chris is the MD of the company. He's a big influence in the company. He's a big liability in the scheme as well, as you see if you can do the numbers. You see that his transfer value becomes incredibly more attractive if the sovereign annuity is included in the valuation. It's important to him that it is. Let's just put it like that. Currently, also if Oceanic can do a deal with Chris, then possibly they can do one with some other people as well. Currently, his accrued benefits look good, and there's nobody more aware of that than Chris. He's aware also, though, of the current funding level of the scheme. He's aware of the risk that his accrued benefits are at. He's a pretty switched-on guy, and he kind of gets it. He gets what he has, brackets maybe, and he gets what he might have if things go well. What does Chris want? Well, I'll tell you, what I've found from people in Chris's walk of life over the years, particularly when you come towards the end, you have two, and he has two, albeit apparently contradictory things, but they both keep him asleep. They both stop him sleeping at night. Number one, he's concerned that he might not live very long after retirement. I personally had he was MD of a company, and he was actually reading a report that we did for him the week before his 60th birthday, and trying to decide if he was going to stay in the DB thing or move. He actually died over the weekend. And his wife, okay, she got a 50% benefit in the pension, and she got the 5-year guarantee. She got all that, but actually the significant loss was large. And Chris is aware of that, and he's nervous, and he knows, look, there could be value here. Conversely, he's also worried about the fact that he could live till he was 90, because this is a scheme with no indexation. And I don't know if you remember about money 30 years ago, but if you're 60 and you go on to your 90, the value shrinks. And if there's no indexation, Chris is worried about this. So he thinks, look, I don't want to fully retire when I'm 60. That's very young. I'd like to do something. I'd like to do a bit less maybe than I'm doing now. I would like some point to have a guaranteed level of income. So he's interested in an offer that could be made to him. And so the offer comes along, and they're saying, well, we're going to move you to this DC scheme. We're going to put a DC plus scheme. We're going to put a chunk of money into the deferred pension fund, the secured pension fund, in fact, and we're going to put the rest into other funds, and here's what you get. So he looks at that. He has his thoughts about it. He takes independent advice. He looks to see what that get him at retirement. And when he looks at the pension pot and what it could do for him in retirement, he thinks, you know, that it's maybe all right. He feels that the potential package may well meet his lifestyle needs, and you can see where it could get there. That's kind of worked out at a 3% return, which is reasonably conservative. And so he approaches the conversation, he approaches the discussions in a fairly positive frame of mind. However, he's aware of what he's been asked to give up. So he says, well, I'm not just going to roll over here, you know. I'm going to make the most of these conversations. He's aware of the long-term benefits to the company if he takes it. He's also aware of the implications to himself. So he feels his employer may offer a little bit more just to sweeten the deal. But in practice, he feels there could be a conversation to be had. And issues would be the enhancement that could be applied to the transfer value, the amount that he maybe should put into the secured pension fund, the ongoing contribution, etc. If there's a secretary in the company, Edie, you'll probably recognise her as well. Eddie, I believe, from Absolutely Fabulous. She found that her own business wasn't going so well, so she became anyway. She's got 20 years of service in the scheme, and though her income is modest, she's typical of a lot of the members. Oceanic have a lot of regard for her, and they want to give her as good a deal as possible. And she also would welcome the introduction of the sovereign annuity, because as you can see, it adds a significant number to her transfer value. Her husband has a reasonably good pension also, and they feel that if they can secure a good proportion of her accrued benefit, they'll probably be okay in retirement. But she knows a little bit about the underfunded nature of the scheme, enough to cause her worry, but not enough to give her a definitive understanding. She hasn't been able to afford AVC contributions, and so any cash that she wants to get will have to come from the scheme. And she wants to maximise as much as possible because the children live overseas, and she thinks, well, look, I would like to visit. And so there is a potential offer being made out to her. And again, she looks at it, and in retirement, she has it explained to her what that could mean for her in retirement. And she likes the idea of ring fencing as much of her pension as possible, likes the idea of ring fencing $7,500. She likes the idea of making the tax-free cash available at retirement. She likes, as Enda was saying, the absence of a commutation factor. She likes the idea of having potentially some monies in an AMRF that when she's 65 she can tax efficiently pull back into cash. She likes all that, and so she's prepared to enter the conversation as well. Then we have some people who are the deferred members of the scheme. David's he lost his job. We probably all watched it in the last episode of Office. And he's there, and deferred members are important. They have aspirations, they have things that they want, and sometimes they get overlooked in the conversation. Well, he's moved on employment-wise. He's self-employed now. He intends to work for quite a while, but he has got some needs. He got involved in the boom time property rush. He's got some debts. He would love to be able to pay them down. His income's down a little bit. He has 3 children going through university. He can see the need for some cash. It's interesting, that one, because as we all know, you can't go directly from a defined benefit scheme to the world of ARF. And I think we're doing a disservice to a lot of deferred members of schemes if we just take that, we say that's the conversation closed. There are no routes that we can explore, because we can explore routes. We can get places, and schemes with a significant number of deferred members in them, there's a huge conversation to be had there, and a very beneficial for everybody conversation to be had, because where David would like to be is to be in a position where he could get hold of some cash as soon as possible. He could then maybe leave the rest and work on a bit until he was 65 or 60, begin to access some out, and have a flexible future like we've been saying. And so the conversation is worth having with him as well. And therefore, if the conversation is successfully carried through, if the process is successfully carried through, then the journey should deliver, as I've said all along, an alignment of interests to the company, to the members, and it should also deliver successful outcomes, as I've shown there, and all of which are strongly positive. Yes, nobody's trying to say there's no pain on the journey, and nobody's trying to say that there's no disappointment on the journey, and nobody's trying to say that, as if by magic, the new world is as strong and robust as the old world, because it's not. But then people's lives aren't the same as they used to be either. There are not very many people like my dad around anymore that expect, in the year that Rory McIlroy becomes number one, they expect to still be on the payroll in, I can't even do this sum, what's 60-something years from now? I don't know that people are expecting that anymore. I really don't. So how do we align the interests? Well, this is the piece that I would say, wouldn't I? There's a lot of moving parts. There's conversations to be had. There's things to be looked at. There's actuaries to be brought in. There's a lot of work. But three things are important, and I suppose from a consultant's perspective, these are three things that I think are definitely worth looking at. Number one, there's a feasibility study to be done. You can't do anything until you have a look at the implications. If I was an employer now with any pension scheme in the DB world, I would at least be investing in having a feasibility study done as to the future. For a relatively low outlay, there can be a significant benefit in terms of opportunities that can be seen. Secondly, there's a discussion to be had. There's a long discussion to be had, there's a deep discussion to be had, there's an intense discussion to be had. And it's probably better if that isn't held directly face-to-face, employer and employee. It's pretty good if it's facilitated, if it's explained, and if it's done in a non-threatening way. And then lastly, you have to have good products to bring to the table. So you have the feasibility, you have the conversation. There's no point having the conversation if there's no interesting products and useful products to bring to the table. And I am very impressed, I have to say it, by what we've been hearing today. I think it's a good plus. You know, the plus works. I don't know if David wants to use that line. It'd be a small fee if you do, but I like it. But it is people working in harmony. Okay, key takeaways. Retirement's changed. Space can be created with sovereign annuities. A comfort can be provided for trustees by employers. There's a conversation to be had, and that it's possible to share in investment risk now with some level of guarantee. And that's a major change. That is a game changer. You know, we're kind of throwing it out there in a very low-key way, but that is a game changer. I just want to leave you with a personal opinion of mine. This slide is becoming a last slide of mine everywhere I talk now. I just like it. I'm going to say nothing about it, but there you go. Thank you.